Story 1. The Betrayal Unveiled. Lucas had built a life of stability and success. At 44, he had a loving wife, Eleanor, and an 8-year-old son, James. But the life he cherished was about to be shaken by a revelation that had been buried for years. Lucas had been married once before in his early 20s, to his childhood sweetheart, Amelia. Their love story had seemed unbreakable, but 3 years into their marriage, Amelia had abruptly handed him divorce papers with little explanation beyond the vague words, "I'm not in love with you anymore." Confused and heartbroken, Lucas had no choice but to let her go. As he tried to move on, he found himself abandoned not just by Amelia but by his own family. His parents, his sister, everyone he had trusted, suddenly distanced themselves from him. Calls went unanswered, visits were denied, and eventually he was completely cut off. Left alone, Lucas fell into despair, quitting his job and isolating himself. It was only through the unwavering support of his friends that he managed to rebuild his life. Determined to make something of himself despite the pain, he channeled his energy into starting his own business. Years of hard work paid off, and he achieved the kind of success he had never imagined. Then, out of nowhere, his family resurfaced. They called, messaged, and even showed up at his doorstep, acting as if nothing had ever happened. But Lucas wasn't the same man they had once abandoned. Determined to uncover the truth, he finally confronted his sister, who hesitated before revealing the devastating secret. Amelia hadn't simply left him, she had been involved with his own cousin, Damien. Their affair had resulted in a child, and to hide the shame, Lucas's family had chosen to cut ties with him rather than face the truth. Rage boiled inside him, but so did clarity. They hadn't returned because they missed him, they had come back because they saw his success. They had chosen betrayal, and now they wanted to reap the benefits of his hard work. Lucas stood before them, his voice steady as he spoke. "You were gone when I needed you the most. Now you're here because you need me. But I don't need you anymore." With that, he turned away, leaving them in stunned silence. He had fought his way out of darkness alone, and he would continue forward without them. What would you do if the people who abandoned you suddenly wanted back into your life? Would you forgive or walk away? Let me know in the comments, ***. Let's jump into the next story. Story 2, Buried Lies. For 12 years, Adrian lived under the illusion that his family had his back. Through thick and thin, he believed they would always be there. But when he needed them the most, they vanished, just like that. Years ago, Adrian was deeply in love with his ex-wife, Cassandra. They had what seemed to be a perfect marriage until the cracks started forming. She grew distant, her late nights became more frequent, and the love they once shared slowly faded. One evening, without warning, Cassandra handed him divorce papers, saying she was unhappy. The pain was unbearable, but what came next was even worse. His own family abandoned him. His parents, his sister, even his closest relatives refused to take his calls. It was as if he had become a ghost in their eyes. No explanation, no closure, just silence. Struggling to move on, Adrian threw himself into his work. With nothing left to lose, he built a company from the ground up, pouring his pain into success. And it worked. He became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in his industry. Then one day, a familiar name popped up on his phone. His sister. Then his mother. Then Cassandra. At first he ignored them. But curiosity got the better of him, and he finally agreed to meet. As they sat across from him, their faces filled with forced smiles, he waited for the truth. "We made a mistake," his sister admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cassandra told us you cheated on her. We believed her. But we found out it was a lie." Adrian's heart pounded. "You cut me out of your lives based on a lie? And only now, after all these years, you decide to come back?" They fumbled for words, but he had already made up his mind. They had left him in the darkness when he needed them most. Now that he was shining, they wanted a piece of his light. But he had learned to live without them. As he stood up to leave, he gave them one last look. "I spent years wondering why you abandoned me. Now I realize it doesn't matter. I moved on. And so should you." He walked away, never looking back. What would you do if you found out your family betrayed you over a lie? Would you give them a second chance or let them go forever? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 3, The Return of the Forgotten. Jonathan had been nothing but a footnote in his own family's history. The son they left behind. The brother they pretended didn't exist. When he was younger, he had fallen in love with Emily, the woman he thought he'd spend his life with. But she had other plans. She had been seeing his cousin Eric behind his back. And when the truth came out, Jonathan's world shattered. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal, it was how his family responded. Instead of standing by him, they supported Eric. They cut Jonathan out, labeling him as bitter and unforgiving. His parents, his siblings, even his closest friends, all of them turned their backs on him. With nowhere to turn, he left town and started over. Years of hard work transformed him into a respected businessman. He had a beautiful home, wealth, and the kind of life no one had ever imagined for him. Then one day he received an invitation. A family reunion. The same family that had abandoned him now wanted to welcome him back. Curious, he attended. And as he walked through the doors, he saw them. His parents, his siblings, and even Eric and Emily, now married. Their eyes widened as they saw him, surprised by the man he had become. His mother smiled hesitantly. "Jonathan, it's been so long. We missed you." Jonathan chuckled. "Missed me? Or missed what I've become?" His father sighed. "We were wrong. But family forgives, right?" Jonathan looked around at the faces of those who had left him behind. Then, with a smirk, he responded, "Family doesn't turn their back in the first place." He left that night, knowing he owed them nothing. Would you ever attend a reunion with the people who abandoned you? Or would you close that chapter forever? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 4, Shadows of the Past. For years, Daniel had convinced himself that his past no longer mattered. He had buried the pain, built a life far away, and surrounded himself with people who truly cared. But no matter how much success he achieved, the ghosts of betrayal had a way of finding him. 12 years ago, Daniel had been married to the love of his life, Serena. Or at least that's what he thought. Their marriage seemed perfect until it wasn't. It started with little things. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way she suddenly became distant. At first, he brushed it off, telling himself that work stress was getting to her. But deep down he knew something was wrong. Then one night he came home early to find his worst nightmare unfolding before his eyes. Serena wasn't alone. And the man she was with? His own brother Marcus. The room spun. His heart pounded. Every ounce of trust he had ever placed in his family, in his wife, shattered in an instant. He wanted to scream, to fight, to demand answers, but all he could do was stand there, frozen in disbelief. Serena barely looked ashamed. Marcus, on the other hand, smirked. "She was never yours to begin with, Danny," Marcus had said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You were just the placeholder." Daniel walked away that night, but it wasn't just Serena he lost. His family, his parents, his other siblings, the people who were supposed to support him, chose Marcus. They told Daniel to let it go, to be mature, to understand that love is complicated. He was the one who had been betrayed, yet he was the one cast out. Years passed. Daniel channeled his pain into building an empire. He became a self-made millionaire, running one of the most successful tech companies in the country. He crafted a life that no longer depended on the approval of those who had abandoned him. And then one evening his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hey Danny. It's Marcus. We need to talk. Call me." Daniel stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. After all these years, now they needed him? Curious, he agreed to meet. When he arrived at the cafe, Marcus and Serena were already seated. They looked different, worn down, desperate. "Daniel," Serena began, her voice soft, almost pleading. "We made mistakes." Marcus cleared his throat. "I won't sugarcoat it. We need help. Financial help." Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow, humorless laugh. "Let me get this straight. You betray me, steal my wife, take my family's side, and now that you're struggling, you come to me for help?" Marcus had the audacity to look annoyed. "It's not like that. We're family. Family helps each other." Daniel stared at them for a long moment before standing up. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $100 bill and placed it on the table. "There's your help," he said. "That should be enough for the coffee. Consider it my final favor." Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving them behind, just as they had once left him. What would you do if the people who betrayed you suddenly needed your help? Would you give them a second chance or let them suffer the consequences? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 5, The Price of Betrayal. Ethan had spent years outrunning his past. He had built walls so high that even the ghosts of betrayal struggled to climb them. But no matter how much success he achieved, some people just couldn't resist coming back when they saw his life flourishing. 15 years ago, Ethan had been a different man, one who believed in love, loyalty, and most of all, family. He was married to his college sweetheart, Vanessa, and trusted his brother, Ryan, more than anyone. They had all grown up together, shared childhood dreams, and promised to always have each other's backs. But promises meant nothing when greed and jealousy took root. Ethan worked hard to provide for Vanessa, sometimes staying late at the office to ensure they had a comfortable future. He thought she understood. He thought Ryan, his own flesh and blood, understood. He thought wrong. One night, he came home earlier than usual, excited to surprise Vanessa with a weekend getaway. What he found instead destroyed him. Vanessa wasn't alone. And the man she was with? Ryan. His own brother. The betrayal cut so deep that for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Vanessa scrambled for an excuse, but Ryan? He just stood there, arms crossed, smirking. "You were always too busy chasing money," Ryan said. "You forgot to take care of what was yours." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. Every moment, every late-night conversation, every inside joke they had shared, it had all been a lie. But the worst part? His family took Ryan's side. His parents, his relatives, even mutual friends, they all tried to tell him to move on, to understand that love was complicated. No, betrayal wasn't complicated. It was a choice. So Ethan made one too. He cut them off. Every last one of them. He left town, took the savings he had, and started over. He worked like a madman, building a business from the ground up. Through sweat, sacrifice, and sheer determination, he became one of the most powerful real estate moguls in the country. He was no longer the man they had walked over. He was a man they couldn't ignore. And then fate came knocking. One day, after years of silence, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Ethan, it's Mom," the voice on the other end said, hesitant. "Ryan needs you." Ethan's lips curled into a bitter smile. Ryan, the same brother who had stolen his wife, laughed in his face, and watched as their family turned against him. "Why would I care?" Ethan replied coldly. His mother sighed. "He made mistakes. We all did. But he's struggling now. He lost everything. The business he started failed, and Vanessa left him. He has nothing, Ethan. Can't you find it in your heart to help?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline outside his penthouse window. Funny how life worked. Once upon a time, Ryan had taken everything from him. Now he had nothing, and Ethan had everything. For a brief moment he considered it. Considered extending a hand, proving he was the better man. But then he remembered the smirk. The laughter. The betrayal. "I did find it in my heart," Ethan said. "A long time ago. But you all threw it away." And with that he hung up the phone. If you were in Ethan's shoes, would you help Ryan? Or would you walk away like he did? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 6, When the Past Comes Knocking. For years, Noah had convinced himself that the past was just that, the past. He had moved on, built a life of success, and promised himself that he would never look back. But the past had a funny way of showing up when you least expected it. Noah grew up in a tight-knit family, or so he thought. He had always been the responsible one, the one who put family first, the one who sacrificed his dreams to take care of everyone. His younger brother, Caleb, had always been reckless, but Noah never imagined that his own blood would betray him. When Noah married Olivia, the love of his life, he thought he had everything he had ever wanted. They were young, happy, and full of dreams. But those dreams shattered when he came home one evening to find a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." No explanation. No conversation. Just like that, she was gone. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. He begged for answers, but no one in his family seemed surprised. In fact, they avoided him altogether. And then the truth hit him like a freight train. Olivia had left him for Caleb, his own brother. The person he had defended, protected, and supported all his life had been sneaking around with his wife. And the worst part? His family had known. They had all known. But instead of standing by him, they chose Caleb. "You need to move on," his mother had said. "Caleb and Olivia are in love. You can't hold on to the past." That was the day Noah walked away. From his family. From his hometown. From everything. And that was the best decision he ever made. Years later, he was no longer the heartbroken man they had abandoned. He had built an empire, one of the most successful tech companies in the country. He had wealth, power, and respect. Everything they thought he'd never have without them. Then one afternoon, an unfamiliar number appeared on his phone. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Noah?" The voice on the other end was shaky. "It's Mom." A long silence. Then she spoke again. "It's Caleb, he needs you." Noah almost laughed. Caleb. The same man who had stolen his wife, who had ruined his life. "What does he need?" Noah asked, his voice cold. His mother hesitated. "Olivia left him. He lost everything in the divorce." The business he started failed. He's in trouble, Noah. He needs help. Noah leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the skyline from his high-rise office. Years ago he had been the one in trouble, the one abandoned. And no one had come to save him. Do you remember what you told me back then? Noah asked, his voice calm. His mother was silent. You said I needed to move on, he continued. And that's exactly what I did. He ended the call, feeling nothing but freedom. What would you do if the people who betrayed you came back asking for help? Would you forgive them or let them face the consequences of their actions? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 7. The Invitation. Nathan never thought he would hear from them again. Not after what they had done. It had been 15 years since his family had cut him out of their lives, 15 years since they had chosen his ex-wife over him. But now, as he stared at the elegant white envelope in his hand, he couldn't help but smirk. It was an invitation. To his sister's wedding. The same sister who had turned her back on him when he needed her the most. The same sister who had stood beside his ex-wife, Melissa, instead of him. Nathan had once been the golden child, the son his parents were most proud of. He was ambitious, hardworking, and successful. At just 25 he had married Melissa, the woman he thought he would spend forever with. She was everything to him. Until she wasn't. One day he came home early from work, hoping to surprise her with dinner. Instead he was the one who got surprised. Melissa wasn't alone. And the man in their bed? His own best friend. Nathan's world collapsed. He thought his family would support him, stand by his side. But when Melissa spun her lies, when she cried and played the victim, they believed her. She said you were never home, his mother had said. She told us you were cold and distant, his sister had added. They turned against him. Nathan packed his bags and left. No one called. No one checked on him. To them he was gone. But he didn't waste time drowning in pain. Instead he built himself back up. Now years later he was a self-made millionaire. He had power, influence, respect. And not a single one of them had been there to witness his rise. And yet here it was. An invitation. Curious he decided to attend. Not because he cared, but because he wanted to see their faces when they realized just how much they had lost. When he arrived, the room went silent. Eyes widened, whispers spread. His sister approached him first, her expression unreadable. Nathan, you came. He smirked. I was curious. His mother walked up next, teary-eyed. We've missed you. Nathan chuckled. Missed me? Or missed what I've become? His father shifted awkwardly. We made a mistake, son. Melissa, she wasn't who we thought she was. Oh, so now you know? Nathan said, raising an eyebrow. Funny how the truth always comes out after the damage is done. His sister sighed. Can't we just start over? Nathan took a deep breath. Once, he would have given anything to hear those words. But not anymore. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. I already started over. And I did it without you. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of their lives for good. What would you do if the family that betrayed you suddenly wanted to make things right? Would you give them a second chance or leave them behind? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 8. The Unfinished Apology. Ethan had always believed that time healed all wounds. But as he stood outside the familiar house he hadn't stepped foot in for over a decade, he realized some wounds never truly heal. This was the house where he had grown up. The house where he had once been surrounded by family, by love. But that was before the betrayal, before his entire world had come crashing down. Ethan had been married to Sophia, the woman he thought was his soulmate. He had worked tirelessly to build a future for them, often working long hours to provide the best life possible. But instead of appreciating his efforts, Sophia found comfort elsewhere. And that elsewhere was his own brother, Ryan. When the truth came out, Ethan expected his family to be on his side. After all, he was the victim. He was the one who had been betrayed. But instead of supporting him, they defended Ryan. It just happened, his mother had said. They're in love now, his father had added. You need to let it go, his sister had insisted. Ethan had been shattered. His wife had left him, and his family had abandoned him for the very person who betrayed him. He had no one. So he did the only thing he could, he walked away. Years passed and he rebuilt his life from the ground up. Alone. Now he was successful, powerful, and untouchable. The once heartbroken man they had discarded had transformed into someone they could no longer ignore. And that was why he was here. His mother had reached out, begging him to visit. She claimed they regretted everything. That Ryan and Sophia were no longer together. That the family wanted to make amends. Ethan wasn't sure why he had agreed to come. Maybe for closure. Maybe for curiosity. As he stepped inside, the air was thick with tension. His mother looked at him with tears in her eyes. His father shifted uncomfortably. Ryan sat in silence, unable to meet his gaze. "We're sorry," his mother finally whispered. Ethan studied their faces. He had once longed to hear those words. But now, they meant nothing. "Sorry?" he repeated, his voice calm. "Are you sorry for what you did? Or sorry that you lost me?" They didn't answer. And in that silence, Ethan found his closure. Without another word, he turned and walked away. This time for good. What would you do if your family betrayed you and then begged for forgiveness years later? Would you forgive or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 9, The Price of Regret. Noah had once believed in unconditional love. He had believed in family, in loyalty, in forever. But life had a way of proving him wrong. He had been married to Olivia for 6 years. 6 years of devotion, of sacrifice, of building a future together. He had given her everything. A beautiful home, a comfortable life, and most importantly, his undivided love. But in return she had given him lies. The betrayal came in the form of his own cousin, Derek. The man he had grown up with, the cousin he had always protected, the one he had considered a brother. One day, Noah came home early from a business trip, excited to surprise Olivia with dinner. But it was he who received the real surprise. She wasn't alone. And the man in their bed? Derek. At that moment, his entire world shattered. But what made it even worse was what happened next. His family took Derek's side. His own parents told him to let it go. His sister said, "You weren't around enough, Noah. Maybe Olivia needed more." His relatives shrugged it off, saying, "It's complicated. You can't control love." The people who were supposed to stand by him turned against him. So Noah made a decision. He walked away. From Olivia. From Derek. From all of them. And he never looked back. For years he stayed silent. He worked, he built, he thrived. He became everything they never believed he could be. Wealthy. Respected. Powerful. Then out of nowhere his phone rang. It was his mother. The same woman who had defended Derek. The same woman who had told him to get over it. Her voice trembled. "Noah, oh, we need you." He almost laughed. After years of silence, they suddenly needed him? Still, curiosity got the better of him and he agreed to meet them. When he arrived at the family gathering, all eyes were on him. His mother, his father, his sister, even Derek. His father spoke first. "We made a mistake, son." His mother nodded. "Derek, he ruined everything. Olivia left him and now he's lost. We should have supported you." Noah smirked. Now they regretted it? Now that Derek had nothing? He leaned back, arms crossed. "So let me get this straight. You abandoned me. You betrayed me. And now that Derek has fallen apart, you suddenly remember I exist." Silence. He shook his head. Too little, too late. Standing up, he adjusted his suit and gave them one last look. "You made your choice. And so did I." Then, without another word, he walked away, this time knowing they could never hurt him again. What would you do if your family only realized their mistake after it was too late? Would you forgive them or move on without them? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump into the next story. Story 10, The Shadow of Betrayal. Nathan never imagined that the people he loved the most would be the ones to destroy him. At 23, he had married the woman of his dreams, Isabel. She had been his everything, his best friend, his partner, his future. He worked tirelessly to provide for their future, making sacrifices, staying up late, doing everything he could to make their life comfortable. And for a while it seemed like they were happy. But Isabel had a secret. A secret that involved Nathan's own best friend, Caleb. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was slow, like a knife twisting deeper with every lie, every late night, every excuse. And then one evening the truth came crashing down. Nathan caught them together. The woman he had vowed to love forever. The man he had trusted more than anyone. Both of them standing there, caught in their own web of deceit. But what broke him wasn't just the betrayal. It was what happened next. His family blamed him. "You work too much, Nathan," his father had said. "Maybe Isabel just needed more attention," his mother added. Even his own brother had the audacity to say, "It's not like she doesn't love you, she just made a mistake." Nathan had expected pain from Isabel. From Caleb. But not from them. So he did the only thing he could. He walked away. He left everything behind, his marriage, his friendships, his family. If they weren't going to stand by him, he didn't need them. Years passed. He rebuilt himself. He turned his heartbreak into fuel, his loneliness into success. He became a self-made millionaire, someone who didn't just survive, he thrived. Then, out of nowhere, his brother reached out. "Mom and Dad want to see you," he said. "They miss you." Nathan hesitated. After all these years, they suddenly missed him? Out of curiosity, he agreed to meet. When he walked into the family home, everything felt the same, except he wasn't the same person anymore. His mother rushed to hug him, his father patted his back, and his brother smiled nervously. They acted as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't thrown him aside when he needed them the most. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "So, tell me, why now?" His father sighed. "We made a mistake, son. We should have supported you back then." His mother nodded. "We were wrong. We let Caleb and Isabel manipulate us. We regret it every day." Nathan studied their faces. The guilt was real. But was it enough? He had spent years rebuilding himself without them. Did he really need them now? With a deep breath he spoke. "I appreciate the apology. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were." They looked at him, hopeful. "I moved on," he continued. "And so should you." Then, just like before, he walked away. This time without any regrets. What would you do if the people who betrayed you finally admitted they were wrong? Would you let them back into your life or keep moving forward? Let me know in the comments. Through these stories, we've seen a common theme: betrayal by the people who were supposed to stand by us. Whether it was a spouse, a best friend, or even family, these characters faced unimaginable pain from those they trusted the most. But what did they do? They didn't let the betrayal define them. They didn't beg for love or loyalty. Instead, they walked away and built a better life, one where they no longer depended on those who abandoned them. So, what can we learn from these stories? Loyalty is a choice. If someone betrays you, they made their choice. Now it's your turn to make yours. Success is the best response. Instead of wasting energy on anger or revenge, focus on bettering yourself. Not everyone deserves a second chance. Some wounds heal, but the scars remain. If someone only regrets hurting you after you've succeeded, ask yourself, do they miss you or do they miss what you have? You owe nothing to those who left you. The people who truly love you will stand by you in your darkest moments, not just when it's convenient. If you've ever experienced betrayal, remember this: the best way to move forward isn't to seek revenge. It's to live a life so great that those who doubted you regret ever letting you go. Which story resonated with you the most? Have you ever faced a betrayal like this? Let's talk in the comments. And if you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support us. Your support means everything, and we'll keep bringing you the most engaging stories every week. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let betrayal break you.